so much of what we've heard from the panel, is about, not about fear, but about how careful you have to be and how difficult it can be to actually share the right message. I've got to say, I'm very, very happy to hear so much about, having integrity and being very clear on your message. But I wonder how many people in the room don't Twitter because of fear. That's why I don't Twitter, and that's why, company-wide, I work for a global company, we actually have a team, but you don't want them to be younger, you don't want them to be older, you want them to be really, really clear on the message. It's a really, really tight rope to walk. And I'm just wondering, life doesn't have a guidebook, but I'm wondering could you recommend any articles or, I suppose listening to the panel today has been a good eye-opener for me, but is there anywhere that you can just get a little bit clearer on the best way to be able to handle the medium?
Thanks for that question. Now, we'll do actually a bit of a straw poll. How many people have not actually engaged in social media because of concerns that their information out there might be misconstrued or taken in a different fashion? Yep. So there is definitely a thought along those lines.
I think a lot of the fear comes through not having the knowledge of how to use it, but I suppose my recommendation to anyone, or my advice to anyone would be, if you're not going to say it to my face, don't tweet it. And I'd say that to a lot of people. Would you go after that brand and complain about them to their face or on the phone, or are you just going to hide behind a little avatar on social media and criticise them? And if you're not going to do it verbally to my face, you shouldn't really do it on Twitter, because it will come back to you. Someone will see it, someone who possibly supports me will jump on you. And when you're jumped on by a couple of hundred people, that could become a couple of thousand, that's when it becomes nasty and you see it. So it's just write what you want to write, but think about how you're going to write it. And remember tone. We all talk about tone in emails and how, you get that email and you think, how rude. And you go, hang on a minute, it's an email. It's short, sharp information only that they're not asking. They've taken out all the please and thank yous and all that sort of stuff. See it for what it is.
I think as well we've been talking a lot about corporate social media and businesses using social media and events as well. Ali brought up the point that she has multiple accounts. I have a personal account. It's called Kiwi Sports Fans, and I have a group of friends where we just talk sport and we just follow, New Zealand athletes and just are basically informing people about sports that are going on in the country, and we're fast and we don't care and we're fearless and we slam Aussies all the time, and that's what you can do. Yes,
excuse me.
when you're with your business accounts, of course you have to bring in the integrity of the brand, but if you're under an alias or your personal account, reflect your personalities, reflect what you are wanting to get across and get achieved. We want to have a cheeky account that's going to gain us followers. Gaining followers gets more engagement.
Start with a handle that possibly doesn't identify who you are, but still be who you are, and just test the water, and you watch how it'll happen. And I've connected with people who I haven't talked to in years or met once when I was 15, and it's that reconnection. And you go, my God, they're still out there. So it can be fun. It really can be fun, but it can be addictive.
I'll take one more question on PS on this, but we must move forward after that.
Hi, I agree with you on the tone. I do a lot of social media for our business, Northport Events, and I am one of the younger people in the team. But I think a lot of it is about knowing the tone, and if you're not sure about something or you have a slight thought that it might be seen the wrong way, just sense checking it with someone else. There's one for process and I'm very much one for structure and formulas and a plan, and we have a bit of a structure about what we're going to be tweeting or Facebooking in the months ahead leading up to our show. And of course it's organic and you go with what's trending and what's going on the day, but you always sort of have a base of what's safe and what you can talk about. You mentioned you work with a social media team. Do you have some kind of structure or plan for that as well, and what do you find works best?
Sorry, who was that aimed at?
I can, from our side, yes. So our social media team, they've got a content plan, I think, for the next, on the top level, might even be 18 months, because they use a lot the major events like the The triathlon that we had in town, for example, was a major one for them, to use that for social media. So they've got a long-term plan, and that sort of, I think, gets filled up on a quarterly basis with more detail, but sort of a long-term view. What are the main anchor points you want to talk about? Campaigns that we get to the country that we've got in market, like a good example in China. I'll pronounce it completely wrong now, but they've got something similar called Weibo over there, and we have had opinion leaders over there that we're the #1 on Weibo, so obviously that has a strong influence on that plan as well, to say this is our anchor point for the year, that person comes to New Zealand, and the whole rest of the plan falls out of that. So yes, pretty massive plan from them.
Cool, thank you, Björn. Thank you very much for the question. We must move on from onto our next topic, but thank you very much for the input from the floor, and thanks to our panel. Our next area of questioning is around PCOs. And as you see, the question on the board is what is the future in the industry going forward? And again, just get a quick check. If you are a PCO or you own a PCO, work for a PCO, can I have a hand in the air and just have a quick look in the room? Radio, so obviously very relevant to a crowd out here and also on stage. So, exactly as it is, I might throw this one to Stephen because he's absolutely live on stage. What is the future in the industry going forward for PCOs? Being that PCOs, the whole cycle tends to be that a client might come on, they want to put an event together, they find that it starts to get too large for them, eventually they know they need support, they bring in a PCO, eventually the PCO does a fantastic job, it continues to build, and eventually the client realises or thinks that they then can come back and run that event because they know how to do it now, and then they decide that the PCO is not required anymore, and there seems to be a cycle of events that happens over many years. Stephen, what's the future of PCOs?
Well, certainly there's a future for PCOs, I can confirm that. I think we need to look back a lot to the not too distant past as a setting point, in terms of, we recall probably in the last decade, people talked about how the meeting industry would turn to a virtual hybrid environment and people weren't going to meet face to face, which meant that PCOs probably had less work to do. That's proven that with some evolution that's not to be the case. People still want to meet face to face, and people still need to network and have that human contact. And that sort of sets the scene that PCOs are continually evolving. PCOs were pretty much known as logistics managers, and now as they move forward and look to the future, they're certainly developing into a lot more areas. PCOs now are marketers, they're negotiators, they've got to be financial advisors, they've got to be consultants. There's a whole lot of and as that develops, there's a whole lot of specialist roles, and certainly at the conference company, we've brought a lot of specialist roles into that, and certainly into that sponsorship, that marketing environment, and the communications environment. So PCOs have certainly changed from what a client would say is they're a logistics provider. So taking the scenario that you brought up, Greg, and going a bit of a cycle, PCOs are still going to provide those core services, but the stretch or the value add is those other services that that client really doesn't have the specialist skills in. So those items that I mentioned around the marketing, communications, and social media, which we've just been talking about, is another specialist role that fits in that as well. So as we look to the future in terms of the industry, it's around evolution, and the companies that are involved as PCOs, we talk about now, we don't sell on the solution, but we sell on the problem. And those core specialist roles which PCOs are developing really develop the foundation for the future of PCOs. So certainly a future moving forward. It's a continual involvement that reacts to how our clients and our industry works. But as you can see, if we look back 10 years, we talked about we wouldn't be here as PCOs because everyone's going to meet in a virtual space. That hasn't proven true. We need to continue to develop our skills in specialist areas. So the future, it looks bright for PCOs, I believe.
Thanks, Stephen. Ellie, do you have any comments around this?
Yesterday with the FML, it was interesting because I was able to talk to a few event organisers who are in-house association organisers. And there seems to be a strong trend to do that now, because some bigger organisations or bigger associations have seen that it's more cost effective to have someone actually employed within the organisation being an event person. But the interesting thing is then that those event managers and some of the people I talk to only do 1 or 2 events a year, and I'm like, what do you do for the rest of your time? Is that cost effective then? I am concerned with the way the PCO industry group within SINS, and obviously our industry association is going. I set up for 14 and a half years ago, and I was, as to quote the well-known CEO in the industry, a shingle hanger. I didn't know what I was doing. I came out of sports management. I was very good at what I did in sports management. My skill set transferred over quite nicely. And then all of a sudden I realised that there were ways to do things and there were memberships to join and that sort of thing, and got myself on. We formed quite a good industry group where we had to follow ethical pathways. We had to prove that we had the capabilities, financial marketing, financial reporting and all that sort of stuff. And there were 17 of us that went through that process and were approved. And we sat there thinking this is quite good. I'm one of those 17 endorsed SINS PCOs. But it's got weak. And you can't use it. There's no point being a SINS endorsed PCO if people aren't going to use SINS endorsed PCOs. And I'm not saying that the venues or the suppliers or whoever should never take a booking from anyone but a SINS PCO, because you need the business. You're not going to say no to business. So there is still an issue in the industry, I think. As a group, I don't know how we're going to get through that, but we do need to get through it. Otherwise, we are going to see some structural changes that aren't going to be good for us as individuals or as a group. But I don't know how the PCOs in this room feel about that either.
So we can ask questions on the floor.
I'd like to comment on that as the immediate past president of the group that Ellie refers to. Twofold thing. There's companies or a company that are involved in that group that's hell-bent on ruining those rules and regulations very wrong by not following the rules and owing lots of money around town. Various suppliers talk about that sort of thing, but they are not prepared to raise it with the industry bodies to get something done about it. So it runs the risk of PCOs losing their credibility, and all of the work that's gone into that group will fall over unless it's supported by following what Ali said in the sense of those PCOs in theory operate ethically. But the risk at the moment is that there are ones out there that aren't doing that, and unless something's done about it to strengthen it, it's going to be bad for everyone in our industry.
Thanks, Paul. Do we have any further comments on the floor regarding our PCOs?
I think it's in the fourth agenda point as well. That's comment I was going to make there. It was around the collaboration with SINS in terms of what that actually means to SINS endorsed PCO and the promotion of that and the wider message that goes with that. It's probably an area that we would identify as something that does need to be addressed and what that means.
And I'll just add my piece to that as well. I had an interesting conversation with somebody in the room a few days ago around the same topic, and from an entirely international marketing perspective, the PCOs are like gold, because you guys, they handle sort of the real decision makers of the conferences. They have the advocates, because people coming on conferences here, as far as I can see, after a year, they all go back pretty happy what they had. Currently, that's like marketing potential for future conferences, and the PCOs are really sort of, well, gatekeepers almost to help us market us better in that space. So there's a real marketing value in that role as well that I think New Zealand as a nation hasn't really tapped into. So quite a few other areas we should be looking at with that group as well.
Just a question for you, Bjorn. While you're talking around PCOs, obviously you manage the CAT fund in terms of pitching out for international conferences to come through to New Zealand. In regards to what Ellie's talking about with a group of PCOs, SINS endorsed, there's a need to be adhering to the requirements and rules of the PCO Association. How do you, as TNZ, choose who to partner with in terms of PCOs when it comes to pitching for those major events?
Yeah, very good question. So we went through, when you say I manage the CAP fund, so Leonie's really the person, the expert in that space, so catch up with her later on any details around that as well. But we went through a pretty robust and lengthy process to get that right around which PCO suits which pitch. There's obviously PCOs more experienced in certain areas than others, some more experienced in the international business than others. Often the application comes with a PCO attached already, which makes life for us as sort of a government agency particularly easy. But there is definitely a thinking around who's strong in a field, who's proven excellence in that field, who's suitable for that conference. We will go along that track. So Leonie's been through a pretty robust process around that, who to identify to work with. But saying that again, it'll be fairly own in most cases. We already have a PCO coming with the bid that's working on it jointly. In those cases where we don't, we work from a list with past expertise of people who have shown excellence.
Cool, thank you. Any further points around PCOs? From the floor? No? From our panel?
We're needed. And most of my clients would say that, and I think most of the venues would say that. It is so much easier dealing with a PCO that knows what they're doing, it's, you know, there are times when you get the odd phone call 3 months out from someone else's event and they say, can you help us? You know, my wife started to organise my conference and you go, sorry, can't help you, clashes with whatever we're doing, but yeah, try this person. But I think, you know, a lot of venues and a lot of accommodation providers come back to me and go, we don't want to talk to anyone but you, because you do know, you know the systems, you know the way everything works, and I've been coming to these sorts of things for years, so I've got the networks in place. And you know, I had a phone call the other day from a PCO, landed in Dunedin, miscalculated, pouches, lanyards, whatever. Ali, any chance you got extra supplies? Chucked them in a taxi, went down, and that's the way we work as a group. We are collaborative and we do get on well, and we are there to help each other, and hopefully we can stand above what's going to go about to unravel, and we can come through it on a positive way.
So a perfect example of collaboration, working together with partnerships essentially right across the industry, which makes it so much easier for clients. Stu?
Thanks, Greg. One of the issues we've been hearing with Meeting News Magazine is about transparency of PCOs. Where are the costs? Are there hidden costs? How are you presenting them? What's the consistency? And that was an issue that was raised at the PCO conference in Australia late last year. So have you got any comments on that topic?
I think certainly it's an item or an issue, whichever way you want to describe it, that's quite prevalent out there. It's talked about a lot, certainly in terms of the RFPs that we respond to. It is quite clearly identified. It's quite a terminology that's used quite often now, and I can look back to a recent proposal we submitted where it was probably the key item on the as part of it. I think in terms of, I can't speak on behalf of all PCOs, but certainly from a conference company point of view, where a service isn't provided, a fee isn't charged. And I think that, I wouldn't be able to speak on behalf of all PCOs, but that would be our mantra moving forward in reply to that question, and certainly how we would be dealing with clients. And you know, if a client is certainly, or a person we're dealing with, a supplier has got a certain issue in that area, then we're quite happy to be transparent. You know, if that requires a formal quote that needs to go to a supplier that's on the letterhead from this, or to the client from the supplier, then we'll do that. So yeah, I think it's an area that's very much come to the fore. Clients, suppliers, the whole industry is very aware of it, and I think it's been. I mean, you talk about the accreditation standards. Certainly, it's within there in the ethical side of things. And as I repeated, certainly from our point of view, you know, if a service isn't provided, then we're not charging a fee.
From our point of view, I'm completely transparent. I say to my clients, this is the bottom line. We will take commissions from hotel accommodation only. We do not have add-ons. We do not do this. My own mantra and my own ethics go, if I cannot do this conference or this congress for this management fee, I shouldn't be in the industry. I've had conversations recently with a few PCOs, or not necessarily endorsed since PCOs, who seem to take percentages of sponsorship earned. And you take some of the pharmaceutical conferences where you don't have to do a jot of work to get drug companies putting in sponsorship money, and then some people are taking 20-30% of the sponsorship income. Now, ethically, I don't think that's right, but that's my own personal belief. But I think if you are putting in requests for tenders, you've got to be completely transparent, because it comes back to bite every single one of us in the future. And I know that there are those that will add on breakfast here, $20 a head, you know, obviously not, but we'll sell it to the client for $30 a head. And so I often say to clients when I've looked at previous budgets that they've done, I'll say, just ask for original invoices, and then you know what your realistic costs are, because most of mine are not for profit. They can't afford to be gouged.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point. I think the proof will be at the end of the day in terms of the ongoing relationships with the clients, because we hear it time again as well with where we've been lucky enough to pick up some business or take on a client on a long-term basis, that they tell us about how they've asked for financial reports and it just comes through in such an ambiguous way they can't understand it, and it gets to the point where it's just too hard. And so their proof will come in that service delivery and that transparency area from the PCO, that if they're able to continue that long-term relationship, then that will be through that.
Well, that goes back to as well what we're talking about around social media. It's integrity and authenticity in pretty much every facet of business. And it's only good for business. It always comes down to the relationship that you have with your end client, regardless of whether you're a PCO, a supplier, or whatever. Any further points? Paul, please.
Yes, Stu, just to comment further on that question you posed. I was embedded in that process with the Aussies a little bit, and it's centred around the separation and the difference between what lots of people think of, and we as a group of SINS endorsed PCOs think of PCOs versus event managers. The association in Australia is structured very differently to ours, that they have a bunch of event managers that are their members and can be certified, and then they have a bunch of professional conference organisers that are certified using the same system. It's why the SINS PCO group was formed, because we wanted to differentiate the way that we operated and the way that we charged our clients and the way that we showed them invoices, and there was 100% transparency in theory there with our clients, which is what the code of ethics that we'd signed up to, versus people out there that still promote themselves as PCOs, and that's their right. It's certainly not, protected in any way, but they can't show the level of transparency when it comes to charging or doing markups or taking commissions from suppliers. So that's why the Aussies are struggling with transparency, and because their association's sort of 800 people strong. Not many of them are what we term a true PCO here in New Zealand. Most of them are event managers that don't have the financial structures and operate in an entirely different way.
Thanks, Paul. If there's no further comments on the PCO questions, we shall move through into our next topic, which is around experienced personnel. And this is certainly something I've seen, I've had experience of within the industry, talking to individuals within it. We have this a relatively small market here in New Zealand, and we have a great deal of event professionals who come through, do some amazing work, get very experienced, but how do we retain them? How do we look after them? How do we nurture our experienced personnel? So with that in mind, let's the floor and her. Natasha, we haven't heard from you for a while.
To be honest with you, Greg, I think it's actually getting harder. It's not getting easier. And I think there's many, facets of this conversation, but I think a few just to sort of focus on is that there's a lot of competition for us in New Zealand, and I think that whether that comes from our university students going through the infamous OE and them heading over to the UK, whether it's the bright lights of Australia luring them across there. Damn those Aussies, I tell you. But also too, I think as employers in 2013, you're right, we do have to look outside of the square, and we're very lucky that we do have some fantastic venues. We're attracting some really amazing large conferences and conventions and so forth into New Zealand. It's for me and for our company is that we are 100% behind the convention centre. We're into Auckland. Let's bring the new one into Christchurch. Let's look at Queenstown, because these are actually going to give us the ability to bring in bigger events, larger delegations, more work, more opportunities for the industry in general, and that in turn is going to be more challenges, I guess, for our companies, but also too for our people. And you're right, we do operate in a condensed market. We do have a lot of smaller events, and even our company as well, being that we have smaller hotels in many regional areas, there are still opportunities for us to continue to nurture, to develop, to train, to mentor, to guide. And I think from our perspective, we try to work together with our team as best as we possibly can in developing their careers, working in a mentor environment, and just really trying everything we can to try and keep these people in New Zealand. And I know that we still, 5-6 6, 10 years for some of these plans down the track in terms of convention centres and being able to cope with larger numbers and bigger events. And so in the interim, it's about us working together to look after these people and to I guess make sure that we're challenging them and we are developing them, because they are going to be the people that will take our places. They are going to be the professionals of the future in New Zealand, and I think we'd all probably want to have a bit of a hand in helping mould these people and keeping them here.
So what actually happens? Can I get a bit of a show of hands out in the room? Who out of here, from an experience point of view, has considered moving offshore because there weren't enough opportunities here in New Zealand? Who actually has moved offshore because there weren't enough opportunities in New Zealand? And I'd say who's returned, but you're already here, which is great to see. Do you see from our group here today? Do you see industry issues for our top experienced people? Is it difficult to find the roles that you're wanting?
I think you see a lot of role hopping.
Yep.
You know, how many times do I look in this room and see someone on this table and I think, my God, last year they were sitting on that table because they were actually employed by a different organisation. And I think that's what we see. And then you sometimes see someone hit the top job in a role and then go back to grassroots to bring up another company or another agency somewhere. And it's that cyclic thing that you see, great, they're using their experience to bring up that startup and start them up again. And I do. You know, you do see lots of people role hopping.
Yeah, that's my experience as well. You're seeing very similar roles as well, people moving crossways. Stephen?
I mean, you look around this room and I think Ellie's put it pretty well. There's a lot of experience in this room and there's a lot of people that you would class as mentors, leaders. And also as you look around the room, there's quite a wide mix in that experience, which I think shows we call about, you know, local New Zealand, and it's a smaller industry than around the world. So we're actually very lucky that we have that industry that has that collaboration, that networking opportunity. Certainly this morning, it's a great group to have around the room, and I think that's one of the key things in terms of how we're keeping experienced personnel or keeping potential candidates within our industry, is that they can see a clear career path, or they can actually talk to the people that can provide them the advice and that mentoring, and that people are willing to do that. They're not just in an environment of, well, this is my bit of land, this is my bit of business, and I'm not going to share any knowledge. Here we are this morning talking as a collective group about some issues and sharing our own thoughts in that area. And I mentioned in response to the PCO question in the future there, is that the move into specialist role now allows people in this industry to actually take on an area that they're passionate about or an area that they want to specialise in. We've seen the growth of social media, we've seen the growth within the marketing side, we've seen the growth within the sponsorship side, which is certainly a key part of any successful meeting that has sponsorship as a component. So the ability for people to have a clear career path is very vital here, and that they can actually move down a path of being, as opposed to being all and everything, to in a role of, now I'm talking from a PCO point of view, is that they have the opportunity to either take on that more of a leadership role within the project or to actually specialise within an area. And I think the key thing, as I mentioned at the start of my response, was that the networking opportunities or the mentoring system that we have in New Zealand is very key to that. We work widely in Australia with a number of venues and a number of suppliers, and we also work with a number of PCOs that are very large. You know, some of the larger PCOs in Australia are 100 plus personnel, and you become another person within the company. We're lucky enough that companies in New Zealand aren't getting that large, and we have still that environment where people are still part of a team, part of something, can actually take ownership of that. So, and as we know, as people graduate, their longevity within a role is much shorter, so they do need to have those key points that's going to make them want to stay, and that's going to come around a lot of questions around culture, ethics, and the environment that they want to work. So, everyone, certainly in a leadership role within a company, needs to identify those areas as well. As it's not just about providing an environment that they like to work in, it's actually about the culture of the company as well. That's really key for people that are graduating, because that's a lot of the questions that they ask now when they're going through a recruitment process.
Yeah, so it's something that struck me as you were speaking as well, Stephen, was that aspect of when you're nurturing somebody who has a great deal of experience, they have a huge amount of passion. The whole thing about our industry is the fact that we've come into it because we love what we do. The fact that we've made businesses out of it and we're making money out of it, it's a kind of a result of that, but we're in it because we really enjoy it. We wouldn't be doing the 16, 20 hours a day and more from this industry if we weren't actually really passionate about it. So maybe it's a case of, for our experienced personnel, it's actually matching their passion with a role, as opposed to saying this is the role you have to fill, you have to fit the criteria of this role. It's actually individually looking at those experienced people and using the skill set that they have to perhaps morph the organisation you have. Thoughts on that?
One of the things I did was, some time ago, was approached by the Chamber of Commerce in Dunedin to stand as a board director. Got on the board, but then decided that we didn't have any representation or enough representation in the tourism industry, and definitely not in the C&I industry. So, me being me, sort of forced a mandate, and that's why I now chair the newly formed Tourism Committee for the Otago Chamber of Commerce. And we've got CEOs from the various venues down there and some of the GMs from the hotels. And it's because I want more and more happening in this industry at a higher level, especially in Dunedin, because of the changes that have been down there venue-wise and what changes we are about to face structurally at Tourism Dunedin and the DCC, and with a potential 28-storey hotel.
Rub it in.
Thanks, Ali. Any further thoughts on our experienced personnel and their roles in the industry? Cool. Righty-ho. So we shall move to our major organisations in terms of collaboration. Do we have enough? Do we have too much? Is there ways forward in terms of the large organisations such as SINS, TNZ, EEAA? Do we have enough collaboration, and what are their foci and priorities from these organisations? We don't have anybody from SINS up here on the stage, but we certainly have from TNZ, Björn Spreitzer. So what's your thoughts, Björn?
I think I shared my views with a few people before already. I'm still amazed, and this is meant in the most positive way, so I'm obviously German, so I can be more direct sometimes and get away with it. I'm still amazed, and that's why I love New Zealand, how small everything is. You know, we just talked about company sizes, and if you look at TNZ, we get referred to as a big company. We've got 120 odd staff worldwide. Tourism Australia got more in Europe than we got worldwide, just to put it in perspective. So that really points into my really strong opinion that New Zealand's biggest challenge is its size, but it's also the great opportunity that I can see as an outsider is that we don't have the capacity to have too many egos in doing their own thing. We really have to collaborate to be successful, and that's the real power, because looking at the different bodies that we've got, Tourism New Zealand, for example, by default we're like a destination marketing agency. That's what we're good at. That's what we can bring to the party, but there's so many other groups in New Zealand that can bring other things to the party that they are excellent at. So it's really sort of finding that balance, who does what, really defining the roles as well, and having that agreement and then move together as one group. So just what I've seen in the last 12 months since I arrived, there's some good starting points, definitely some really good starting points, but there's other areas. I mentioned sort of the PCO world earlier when we talked about it. That's, since last week I very strongly believe about that there is a really untapped potential where, just coming from my side as a TNZ person, oh yeah, of course we should work closer with certain focused industry groups as well to understand what they can bring to the party and work together with them more. So maybe 50% there, yep, where we could be, and having a great opportunity, because New Zealand is so small that you have got more players together makes more sense than 5 medium players trying to do a big thing alone.
Yep. And the relationship between TNZ and SINS, how do you see that? Is it a relationship that is evolving? Is it a constantly growing relationship, strengthening?
It's a relationship that you constantly have to evolve. I think what I can see at the moment, it's structurally, it's a great thing to have an industry body that talks to the National Tourism Board. It's a pretty good start. That you find areas where SINS has got expertise, where Tourism New Zealand has expertise, accepts those areas and actually find a way to work through how it works best. Example, just a sort of a really top level example, but a sense brings the idea, okay, China's a growing market for our industry as well. We've got an opinion as Tourism New Zealand, one small outcome of that conversation is that since together with our partners here in New Zealand, we can do educational pieces in that area. We had put some workshops on together, so those conversations help us as a Tourism New Zealand understand what the industry wants, really what's coming from the industry. Tourism New Zealand, by having people in those markets, we usually got a pretty sound opinion what the market wants, and that's a real conversation to be had. So to answer your question, it's a really good conversation, and by having a conversation, it always evolves where we're going. I'd hate to say this is final and it's amazing. I want to say it's really good where we are at, but it needs to evolve continuously to get somewhere.
Yeah. Every organisations are organic, and they need to be. They need to move and morph for them to be effective. Do we have any thoughts from the floor in regard to our organisations, or any questions that you might want to pose to our panel in regards to the official bodies? A mute room, cool.
The biggest issue in our industry is acronyms. There's far too many of them. If you're entering the industry, you have no idea.
No, this is very true.
I suppose while there's a silence in the room, while I think about some questions, I think the comment I'd make there, I think, would echo is the positive side of things is that we actually do have a national body representing, as opposed to what we see sometimes where it's regional, especially when we work often into Australia. We're working with regional tourism, and I think Queensland's the classic example where you have several that are all competing against each other, and there's no clear message coming out, and it's actually rather mixed, and actually I think works negatively for them. So if I was to pick a positive, there is certainly the national representation. We're lucky as size for New Zealand that we have that. So. And I think, Ali, you're right, there's several acronyms there, and it's interesting. I would comment that we don't work with EEAA. I don't have an association with them, so I'm not, I couldn't comment on that collaboration.
I suppose I could bring some light into there. Show Gizmos, we're a part of SINS and WEAA, and I'm actually part of the WEAA Young Stars program, which is what they're doing over in Australia. So it is Australasian, as I'm sure you're all aware. The Young Stars program is under 35s. And there's a committee on that as well. And what? Yeah, just missed out. Sorry, mate. And what they're doing, I suppose, is their focus, their priorities is focusing on the previous questions, the experienced personnel, and they are upskilling people. So what they're doing is they're giving these companies time to get their younger staff out of the office into rooms such as this. And I've been part of a couple meetings now where they've had industry leaders present to that crowd. So it is helping upskill. They also meet online. We meet online every month, every first Thursday of the month. And we've also, I've run a couple hybrid meetings as well. So we've brought in speakers from New Zealand into the room in Sydney and Melbourne. So they, again, don't have to, invest too much time and cost leaving. But that is one important thing for WEAA is upskilling the youth, is it's getting these people as well as keeping them. It's getting the young people, so they're doing a lot of work in that. And I'm sure you're aware Tess is on the board of WEAA and Eugene, and I'm talking to them also about a similar program, I suppose. And so if you are interested, if you do have some younger members of your staff, be sure to let Eugene and Tess know, because talking about experienced personnel, I think there's a lot to do in obviously keeping, but obviously getting these people as well, straight out of universities, given the experience of what the event industry is like and what they can do.
Yeah.
And Greg, just sort of to add to the whole conversation as well, for me, like in any partnership, it's really important that you have the conversations like we had with the SINS before, with other groups, to really get clear on what the priorities and the strengths of every organisation is. Leonie does it all the time in her CAP bids, to really look at what do 3 or 4 partners bring to one bid, who's best suited to deliver on what. We've got a pretty good view nowadays where Tourism New Zealand is really good at, and we also know where we're not so good at, and it's really sort of sharing that with a partner, working through how they can fill the gaps, and that makes the whole team a lot stronger to really understand what organisation deliver. And I reckon there's a few more organisations to have the conversation with.
I heard earlier that you mentioned that we're a small industry and that we have this ability to network and work together. And I'm just wondering how much of that is positioning and how much is reality. Because there are times where I see that we've got a group over doing a roadshow in the US and a few weeks later someone else is going, I'm wondering how much we are really willing to partner, and when we do partner, are we willing to partner on everybody gains basis or what works for me today basis? So although I think it sounds really positive, I just don't know if we're walking the talk, if you don't mind saying.
I agree. I mean, again, positive first, like what I can see, New Zealand's are probably pretty great and sort of walk the talk a bit more than other countries I've seen so far, in the sense that if you have got a crowd of New Zealanders going offshore to an event, usually they're amazing of selling the destination first and then selling the business. Like IMEX Frankfurt, for example, is a great example. The size of our stand there, I mean, we're like a drop in a wide sea at that show. However, when I see the New Zealanders at the stand passionately getting the business to New Zealand first, and then talking how their business can help that person, I think the willingness is definitely there. Yes, you will always have people going on their own thing, but overall, sort of comparatively, I think we're probably better than other destinations I've seen so far. I mean, our friends at Australia, I don't envy their job, because they have so many more strong players.
So could we conclude from that there'd be a willingness from TNZ to form stronger partnerships with private enterprise in promoting New Zealand abroad, and rather than compare ourselves as a tourist entity against Australia, let's rather set a global benchmark of cooperation?
If you go to our strategic priorities, they're all on our corporate website. Partnering, joint ventures with third parties, it's absolutely part of our strategy. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's written in our statutes.
Thank you very much indeed for the question. Well, ladies and gents, that's pretty much covered across the 4 points that we were going to raise this morning. We took a bit of a poll earlier on about what you thought were going to be the larger issues for us, the big issues facing the industry in 2013 and beyond. Budgets and money tend to feature fairly heavily in there. Venues, of course, is the largest of the thoughts that we've had coming in. The economy, which is constant for everyone, and competition as well. So there's a great deal, but certainly venues, budget and money are the 2 or 3 overriding aspects that we have there from the issues that the industry is facing. I don't know if there's any real comment that we need to make around those. Apart from the giant venues in the centre, of course, we've been, over the last couple of years, we've had the issues around the National Convention Centre, and whether or not, what sort of time frame that's likely to happen and when it's going to be. Obviously that is preying on people's minds as well in terms of being able to get large-scale events across here in the World Congresses, and we need to have a space that is going to be able to take the large number of people that we need to get across. And that's pretty much all I have to say for that.